For 8 years, my mother said there was never room for me. The day she asked to vacation at my beachfront resort, I gave her the same answer she gave me. I still remember the day my mother told me there was no room for me anymore. I was 23 years old, standing in the kitchen of the house I had grown up in. My suitcase sat by the door, and my heart felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. My older brother, Jason, had recently moved back home after a failed business venture. My mother immediately gave him my bedroom. When I asked where I was supposed to sleep, she looked at me and said words I would never forget. "You'll figure something out. Jason needs the room more than you do." At first, I thought it was temporary. A few days, maybe a few weeks. Instead, it became the beginning of 8 years of being treated like I didn't belong. My mother always had room for Jason, room for his mistakes, room for his excuses, room for his endless second chances. But somehow, there was never room for me. I rented a tiny apartment across town and worked 2 jobs to survive. Meanwhile, family dinners continued without me. Holiday celebrations happened without invitations. Birthday parties were planned without a phone call. Every time I asked why I wasn't included, my mother had the same answer. "The house is crowded. There isn't enough space. Maybe next time." At first, I cried about it. Then I got angry. Eventually, I stopped expecting anything. I focused on my own life. I worked mornings at a hotel and evenings at a restaurant. The hours were exhausting. There were nights when I fell asleep wearing my work clothes because I was too tired to change. But I kept going. One evening, an elderly guest at the hotel struck up a conversation with me. His name was Mr. Harrison. He noticed how hard I worked. Over the next year, he became a mentor. He had spent decades in the hospitality industry and owned several successful properties. Whenever business was slow, he taught me everything he knew: management, customer service, marketing, investment. Most importantly, he taught me how to recognize opportunities. Years later, when he retired, he offered me something that changed my life: a partnership opportunity in a small, struggling beachside motel. Most people thought it was a terrible investment. The property was old, the rooms needed renovations, the business was barely surviving. But I saw potential. I invested every dollar I had saved. I worked 14-hour days. I cleaned rooms myself. I handled reservations. I fixed broken furniture. I painted walls. I learned every part of the business. Slowly, things began to change. Guests started returning. Reviews increased. Revenue increased. Within 3 years, the motel had transformed into a thriving beachfront resort. Then I bought out my remaining partners and became sole owner. For the first time in my life, I had built something entirely on my own, something nobody could take away from me. Ironically, that was when my family suddenly remembered I existed. It started with social media. Photos of the resort began circulating online. Travel bloggers featured it. Tourism magazines wrote articles about it. The resort became popular. One afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Honey, I've been meaning to call you." I nearly laughed. No, she hadn't, but I stayed silent. She continued talking. She asked about the business, she praised my success, she told me how proud she was. The compliments felt strange from someone who had spent years pretending I didn't exist. Then she finally got to the real reason for the call. "Our family is planning a vacation." I knew what was coming. "We're 12 of us," she said. "We thought it would be wonderful to stay at your resort." I waited. "And of course, since we're family, we were hoping for a special discount." There it was, the real purpose of the conversation. Not love, not reconciliation, not an apology. A free vacation. I opened the booking system on my computer. The dates she requested happened to be one of the busiest weeks of the year. The resort was completely booked. Every room, every suite, everything. I could have ended the conversation there, but something stopped me. For 8 years, I had listened to the same excuse, the same words, over and over. I took a deep breath. Then I said calmly, "I'm sorry, Mom. There's no room." Silence. A long silence. Then she laughed awkwardly. "No, seriously. I am serious. But you're the owner." "Yes. Can't you make an exception?" I looked out at the ocean beyond my office window. The waves rolled toward the shore. For the first time, I felt completely at peace. Then I repeated the words she had given me for years. "There's just not enough space. Maybe next time." The silence that followed was deafening. She knew exactly what I was doing, and for the first time, she understood how those words felt. A week later, she called again. This time, she wasn't asking for a room. She was asking for a conversation. At first, I didn't want one. The hurt from those 8 years hadn't magically disappeared. But eventually, I agreed to meet. She came to the resort alone. No brother, no relatives, just her. We sat on a balcony overlooking the beach. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." I didn't respond. She continued. For the first time in my life, she admitted the truth. She had always favored Jason. She believed he needed more help, more attention, more support. She assumed I was strong enough to survive on my own. What she never realized is that strength doesn't mean someone doesn't need love. Tears filled her eyes. She admitted she had taken me for granted. She admitted she had hurt me. And she admitted she deserved the answer I gave her. Hearing those words didn't erase the past, but it mattered because accountability matters. For years, I had wanted her to acknowledge what happened. Now she finally was. We talked for hours, not as mother and child, as two adults confronting years of unresolved pain. For the first time in a very long time, I felt heard. Months later, our relationship slowly improved. Not instantly. Trust takes time, but it improved. Jason eventually apologized too. Life moved forward. Today, my resort is more successful than I ever imagined. Families from around the world visit every year. Sometimes I walk along the beach at sunset and think about the girl who once stood in her mother's kitchen with a suitcase and nowhere to go. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her something important. The people who underestimate you do not determine your future. The people who exclude you do not define your worth. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's building a life so beautiful that their rejection no longer has power over you. My mother taught me that there was never room for me in her house. Life taught me something better. I was never meant to stay in that house. I was meant to build something bigger, something stronger, something entirely on my own. And in the end, that beachfront resort wasn't just a business. It was proof that being left out of one place can lead you to create a place where you truly belong. Now, I'm curious. If someone spent years shutting you out and then came back asking for your help, would you have given them the same answer I gave my mother, or would you have welcomed them anyway? Let me know in the comments.